All right, so our first gingerbread session is how to make your gingerbread. And one of the things that we find, or I found anyway, with gingerbread houses kits that you can buy online is the gingerbread sucks. And it's dry and it was made months ago and it's inedible and it's terrible. So this actually is my mother's gingerbread recipe, and she's made it, I don't know, 1,000 times, it feels like, and made dozens of houses from it, as well as hundreds of cookies, and roundly regarded by myself as well as everybody else I know as one of the better gingerbread recipes. So just going to walk you through how to make it. It's really easy and totally straightforward, and then you get yourself some decent gingerbread, and then in other episodes we'll talk about rolling gingerbread out, making the houses, baking the houses, gluing the houses together and decorating them. But better start at the beginning and we'll get some gingerbread. So starting with some room temperature butter, very important. It's almost impossible to work with butter that's come out of the fridge. I mean, you can do it, but it takes a while. Some brown sugar, some molasses, some flour, a couple of eggs, cinnamon, ginger, and of course ginger. Cinnamon, ginger, a bit of cloves, some salt, and some baking soda, and a bit of elbow grease. So one thing that I forgot I need is that. And let's begin. So whenever I cream butter and sugar, I think about my Aunt Hilda, who used to do this by hand. I remember that. It was actually really, it was always really impressive to watch her do this, because it would take, well, it felt like it took forever for her to do it, but it wasn't necessarily a, she would do it with a wooden spoon. And I don't know, I think it was just something that was very meditative for her or something like that. I prefer to use a hand mixer, but you can use a stand mixer if you want, or I suppose if you want, you could use a wooden spoon too. So this takes a few minutes, so I'm sure we'll have a cut here and then we'll come back to it. All right, so into your creamed, let's do it this way. Into your creamed butter and sugar, you put in a cup of molasses. And this is called baking or cooking molasses, which is a mixture of blackstrap and fancy molasses. Blackstrap molasses I find to be really bitter and a bit too strong, and fancy molasses I find to be a bit boring. So the cooking molasses actually is a nice combination of the two. And then we drop in a couple of eggs and mix those up. There we go. All right. Next up, dry ingredients. So let's just clear our deck a little bit. There we go. All right. So dry ingredients are 5 cups of flour. And just in case you're wondering, we'll post a link to the recipe. We'll post a link to the recipe in the description of the video, so you don't have to write it down. But we've got 3 teaspoons of ginger, a teaspoon and a half of cinnamon, and a half a teaspoon of cloves, and then I've got a teaspoon of salt and a teaspoon and a half of soda, and we mix those all together in our dry ingredients, and then we combine our dry ingredients with our wet ingredients, and then we're done. It's actually kind of boring. Or sort of, I guess, sort of anticlimactic. But the other thing about the gingerbread is that before you use it, it needs to go into the fridge for at least a couple of hours to sort of set up. And one of the other things is that you also need to give it a good mix. And it actually comes out feeling really kind of dry and sort of weird. So it doesn't feel like a cookie dough. It can feel sort of alarmingly dry, but trust me, it's how it's supposed to be. So mix it in 1/3 at a time. and combining it really well, because you want it to be as consistent as possible, so that when you make your gingerbread houses, the house itself is, the edges, the walls, all that kind of stuff are nice and smooth. Smells good, that's for sure. And it is a bit of an arm workout, so you can see how it's getting pretty dry, and I haven't actually put all the dry ingredients in yet. So by the time you're done, you're dealing with, it's a bit of a beast, but this is how it's supposed to look. God, who needs to go to the gym? So, all right, one batch of gingerbread. Enough to make, let me just turn this up a bit so I can. Done. One batch of gingerbread, enough to make one house, and enough extra bits so that nobody will steal your house parts. So last thing to do with gingerbread is you need to wrap it in plastic, and which is always such a challenge for me. Wow. Like that. And then just grab my spatula here, tip it out, and make it into a big ball, and hoist it in the fridge for at least a couple of hours, sometimes overnight, depends on which recipe you're reading. My mother was always a big overnight fan until she decided, or learned, I guess through trial and error, that doing it for just a couple of hours she found actually was best for her. So we just wrap it up. And that is done. That's it, and ready for making ready for making all kinds of stuff, you know. So anyway, so there's your one standard gingerbread recipe, and like I say, the recipe will be in the notes below the video, and if you have any questions, just ask away. Thanks a lot.